Okay, there we go. It's going. All right, let's go ahead and do this. So you should be looking at my PowerPoint slides. Again, this is a how to do research lecture. My name is Demarcus, and I'll have some assistance from Kristin Morehouse. The elective outline is pretty clear and simple. We're here to learn about why we do research, what kind of resources you can and or should use, what are the best practices to use search engines, how to actually cite and or cut a card. We'll talk about what it means to cut a card. We'll talk about the technology that you can use to help assist to make this process go more quickly. Some of it can be quite tedious. And we'll also talk about putting together speech documents and some ethical card cutting practices that you should follow so that you don't get any ethics challenges in your debate rounds. So to go ahead and dive in, we're going to talk about a little bit of the background, why we do research, what is the point of research for debaters, besides being the point that your parents love about debate that you learn. We do research pretty briefly to learn about the background of the topic. There's also lots to learn from academia about the background or origin of certain ideas in our society. So this could be the history behind the criminal justice system. It might be the history of law, sex, race, and all kinds of relations that play a role in making all kinds of arguments. Knowing about this will not only make you a smarter person, but it'll also help you become more educated about whatever debate topic it is that you are studying. Additionally, you also do research to learn about what we call stock arguments. And so stock arguments sometimes get a bad rap, but they are not bad. They're really just the most common arguments on any given subject. They tend to be the common or main issues that academics deal with, i.e. these are the real people who address these issues in their day-to-day lives and or in their careers. And of course, we do research to be able to find evidence or cards. We call them that because it refers to, well, really an old process of collecting evidence. So we are all fortunate enough to have grown up in a world of laptops and Xerox copy machines, etc. But those were not always tools that existed for debaters. So in the past, people had to, either cut out a newspaper article by hand and, glue it down to an index card, or write out and copy by hand the text of a book so they could read it as a part of evidence for their debate cases. So that is where the terminology cards come from. It is one of those things that is a relic of the past, just like the save button in Microsoft Word, or a phrase like hang up the telephone. We don't actually do any of those things anymore, hanging up or using a floppy disk, but those are still kind of ways in which our language has not caught up with technology. Now, whenever you are looking at evidence and using it, it's important because the author, who's often an academic, an expert, or a journalist, can add credibility to whatever the argument is that you are making. But I do want to stress to people that although that is important to have cards, specifically when you have what we call empirical evidence, or evidence that is about facts about the real world, statistics, numbers, etc. Not everything in a debate case needs a card, especially in LD. Often having solid, coherent reasoning in the claim, warrant, impact structure is enough to make an argument in an LD round. So now let's talk about the actual, what I call nuts and bolts, how you go about finding and then cutting a card for research. So the first thing you need to know about are the different resources you should use and what to do once you find a good resource and how to get from some really long article online to a perfectly cut card you can read in a debate round. So the first thing we got to talk about are the actual search engines, which are going to be most of your kind of main choices or go-to options for finding evidence. The best search engine, I think, for the research process is Google Scholar. It's going to be able to link you to almost all of the other databases and search engines I have listed below, such as JSTOR or Project Muse. We also have EBSCOR, ProQuest. Services like Hein Online or LexisNexis are often also really good for legal articles that are sometimes hidden behind paywalls. And you can on Google Scholar find almost a link to anything, but some of those things will be hidden behind paywalls. Typically, the people who have access to that are going to be your school librarians, and you should definitely talk to them and ask them on help when you are doing research. Additionally, if you have any older siblings or anyone that you know who is currently a college student, most college students have access to these databases through their college library logins. Additionally, you can also find articles and cards to cut inside of books. Books are the most underutilized resource by the modern debater or modern student, and will depend too much for things that are online, but not everything is online. So I have a question that said, what about Sci-Hub? So Sci-Hub is an open source piece of software that you can use to connect to articles. The reason I'm not talking about Sci-Hub in this lecture is because it is not legal, all right? Not legal. Some of that open source books are stolen from behind paywalls, and the information can have viruses on it. So that is why I'm not talking about Sci-Hub. If you'd like to know, if you know that is already or like to use it, that is between you, your parents, and your internet service provider. Additionally, beyond books, you can also use videos, documentaries, and/or interviews. You can also use the references section on Wikipedia or from any article or book that you find. If you scroll to the bottom or turn to the last few pages, it typically lists out their references or sources, and you should follow those sources back for a lot of really good material. While doing research, I've found a lot of really good evidence that way. Now, once you do find something that is good that you'd like to use, the first thing you should do is read an abstract or a summary of that article or evidence before you decide to download it or read any more of it. Often the abstract will give you a pretty good sense of whether or not there is useful material for you in that article. After you have read the abstract or the summary, you should then, if you find it relevant, download the material. And you should do a kind of bulk looking and search for articles and download, and then organize those articles into folders. So you can start off with F and neg folders. And so put F articles in one folder and neg articles in the other. Once you have all the sources that you think you're gonna need, you should start to then read them and annotate them. So when I say annotate, I mean that you should highlight sections of the article or book that you find important. You should define key terms in the margins that you don't know the meaning of. And in general, you should take notes about what each kind of section or paragraph means. And this will allow you to come back to it later and process or find exactly what it is you read before very quickly. And once you have done that, you should then copy and paste the relevant section to a Word document. Go ahead, Ms.
So one of the things that came up in lab yesterday is that Ava was saying that, you know, her team always says to read, read, read. For any piece of evidence that you cut, you're going to read it 3 times. And the first time is so that you are coming to understand it. The second time, you're underlining it, so you're marking its relevance. And then the third time you read it, you're actually highlighting it for the bits you would want to read it around. So read everything, you know, like any card you're going to cut, you have read it at least 3 times.
Absolutely. Thank you for that amazing advice. I'm now going to go ahead and continue talking about some search tips for how to use search engines properly. The first couple of tips are kind of just basic things that I've come up with over the years. And then after this, I'm going to get into some very specific tools that are already built within search engines that you can take advantage of when searching for different terms. So the first thing you can do is just come up with a list of terms or different words that could be used on a given topic. The way in which topics for debate are written are not always the way in which people who write about these things in academia talk about the material. So for example, this past year we had a topic that read, resolved states ought to eliminate their nuclear arsenals. But the term nuclear arsenal is not often used in the literature. So instead of just searching for nuclear arsenal, you might also want to search for nuclear weapons, nuclear bomb, nuclear states, and or nuclear arsenal. And searching for all of these terms, which are pretty interchangeable in a lot of ways, you're going to be able to find more evidence that's important to you on any given topic. Next, there are some different things you can do within that search engine to get better results for the articles that you want. So the most simple thing you can do is use quotation marks. This will allow you to search for phrases as opposed to words. So for example, if I were to search the term secondary sanctions into Google without quotations, it would search for secondary and sanctions and maybe find a few articles with both words next to each other. But if I put this term in quotation marks, Google will only bring back results that match this wording exactly. Additionally, you can use something called the common words usually ignored kind of search function. You can use the plus or the quotation marks to help in your search. So if you add or search for which versus that with a plus sign in front of which and that, Google will only bring back results for versus. Another kind of neat search trick you can use is the near function, which is one of my favorite functions. You can essentially search for a term or two terms located next or near each other within an article. So for example, if I search for global warming near sea level rise with both of these terms in quotation marks, it'll only present articles to me where both of these terms appear within, let's say, 20 lines of each other, up or down within an article. And there are also some more terms. So for example, the or function is pretty fantastic. This will allow you to search for items with either of the terms you want. This is really useful when you determine that the term the topic is using is not the only way people talk about something. So for example, if I wanted to search for something here, I could search for African American or Black, and it would bring up results that had either of these terms in them, as well as I could search for nose or throat when it comes to searching different terms. And this is really, really useful when you want just at least one term or there's an interchangeable term that you want to use to search for something. Additionally, there's the and function that looks for two words that are used together and when they're kind of overlapped or default. So as you can see here, this little chart to the side tells us when we search for cats and dogs, it brings up articles that show both cats and dogs and not just dogs or cats. And if you don't have enough time to write all of this down, don't worry. I'm going to share the resources that this kind of tips come from with you before the end of this presentation. The next operator you can use is the and not function. So this excludes documents that contain words following it. So the and not is generally used after you performed a search, looked at the results, and determined that you do not see or see pages that you want to use that concern that phrase. So you should use the and not function with a lot of caution because it can eliminate the entire page, and some pages may be of value for you for other information they contain. So when you use the and not function, this should be one of your last ditch efforts to find evidence that you're looking for. So for example, I could search for global warming and I can combine different search tips together. So I can search for global warming in quotations and sea level rise and not California. And so the first two terms must be somewhere, and any page containing California would be thrown out in this search. So the next important thing after you find something online that you think is useful is the ability to create a citation and cut a card for that. So there's a few kind of tools that are technology assist that can help us edit, format, and cite a card much more quickly. And I'm telling you this because if you've never cut cards for, let's say, a case even by yourself before, it can be a very time-consuming process. So I'm going to show you all the tips and tricks I've picked up over the years in order to help maximize how much work you can do with the time that you have. So the best tool that you can use is a tool called Verbatim for Debate. This tool is a set of macro functions for Microsoft Word that allows you to quickly format a document. So you can do the highlighting, the underlining, making things bigger or smaller, but it allows you to do all those things very quickly without doing it by hand. You can only use verbatim for debate if you have a full working version of Microsoft Office with Microsoft Word, and those are only usually available on Mac or PC, so Windows or Mac OS. If you do not have either of these operating systems and you have something like a Chromebook, there is a template you can use that replicates many of the same functions as verbatim to help you quickly format your evidence. I will include that template in the speech drop so you can have that as well. Go ahead. Oh, you're muted, Ms. Morehouse.
Sorry about that. I am inserting, so the part that we just talked about, I've just entered it into the chat. And so it's called Debate Template. It is a free version of verbatim that you can use with Chromebooks. So it's in the G Suite, offering. And to access that, once you're logged into, say, your Gmail, your GDS Gmail, there's something called the waffle or the 3x3 that's in the upper right hand. If you click on that and then scroll to the bottom of that where it says more offerings, you click on that and you search the word debate template is probably the first thing to come up. And then you add that in, and then you have, like Google's version of verbatim to be able to format your cards.
Thank you very much for that bit of advice. And that was a great tool I had even discovered until last summer while working at GDS, which is really great for students who only have access to Chromebooks through their school. So you also have an option to format your evidence quickly and you won't be left out. Now, in addition to using verbatim, which is the main tool you can use, there is a great extension for Google Chrome called Site Creator. And I will demonstrate the use of both verbatim and Site Creator in a moment here. But Site Creator essentially is a little text box at the bottom right of any website or article that you load. And it automatically generates a citation for that article, as well as it gives the article or website a grade, either from A to F, telling you the kind of accuracy or how much you should trust that source. And so it's a really great tool. It's not perfect, but it does help speed up citations and processing evidence more quickly. Additionally, another great resource to use for good examples, as well as just getting some evidence that's already cut for you, is the NDCA Open Evidence Project. This website is the host for about 10 years worth of files that were produced at policy debate camps. Policy camp works a little bit differently than LD camps. They are typically much longer, but policy debaters also receive their topics months before camp even starts. So a lot of what happens at policy camp is file production. They get to work on their topic for the year all summer. And after that's done, a lot of camps upload their resources to be able to use for students for free on the NDCA Open Evidence Project. So if you click on this link, when you get this PowerPoint, you will be able to look at policy topics and all the files by the year. And even if that year doesn't contain something that is not relevant to the topic you're talking about, there are more files in there than just about the topic. Lots of policy stuff is going to be a lot of critique files, a lot of back files that help you create answers to confusing positions that you may not understand. It's just a really great resource that's underutilized by students. So,
absolutely, and I'm inserting that link into the chat as well. Another interesting thing that's there is the debate wikis for LD high school, which, not to take us down a rabbit hole, but sometimes those are useful to know about being able to pinpoint certain arguments and the evidence people are using, and it's not to actually take other people's cards that they've cut, because to ethically know about it, you need to be reading that article, and to be able to effectively use the evidence, you need to have read it as well, so that you understand it fully. But it is a good, a good step along the path to getting good arguments documented.
Absolutely. So what you are looking at on your screen now is an example of a finished card that has been cut. So I want to talk about the different components of what you see on your screen so that you will know how to replicate this whenever it is time for you to cut some cards, which I would presume, since your lab leaders all know you're getting this lecture this afternoon, you will receive homework assignments on cutting cards in the very near future. So the first thing we're looking at here at the very top, this right here is called a tagline. A tagline is a brief summary of the claim that your evidence is making. So the big picture, the main idea. The next thing you see here is this whole thing is the citation. So I'll highlight right here. This is the citation, okay? And in this citation, it starts off normally with the author's last name, the year this article or book was published, and then in brackets, you're gonna have their first name, followed by any qualifications they have. So if they're a professor of philosophy at the University of Mary Washington, right? That'd be an important thing to know or to add in your citation. And that's important because sometimes in debate rounds, your opponent will ask you why, for example, Schellenberger is qualified to talk about nuclear proliferation. And it means that you don't have to memorize it because you can put it right there in the tag and you can bracket off what their qualifications are. After qualifications, you're gonna wanna put the title of the article in quotations, as you can see here, followed by the exact date it was published. And if it's online, the link to the article. If it is a book or something physical, you wanna publish all the information. So the name of the book, obviously we know the author, the page number, or the particular version of that book. And then something that I like to do, or a lot of schools like to do, are create signatures on the card. Is so if you use team kind of file production or card production, you know who on the team cut that card. So usually I do 2 backslashes and then you write either a name or an initial. So this card was cut by Sean, who's also an instructor here if you know him. And then for the actual body of the card, you can see there's text that's highlighted, there's text that's underlined, and there's text that there's no formatting done to. The highlighting is the only part you're going to read when you're reading a card. And so you want to make that as efficient as you possibly can. Particularly, you want to exclude any kind of words that don't add to them or add or subtract to the meaning of what you're trying to say. Usually you'll see some cards once they have been cut from people and they won't make grammatical sense or they don't seem like they do. But when you're reading them in the context of a debate round, no one can really hear the grammar of the card. They kind of just hear the facts that it's positing and putting out into the debate round. All right, so the next thing I want to do is actually I want to, number one, let you see this screen so you can take a second to download the resources I have given you and talked about. What you have there is a link to this PowerPoint presentation. There's a document version of it as well. You're also going to have access to a chart I have made that helps you process all this information. So everything you've seen here or you will see in the rest of this presentation is going to be available at this website for you. All you have to do is follow the instructions on this screen and you can have all these resources right away. The next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to switch devices. I'm going to do a demonstration of how to properly search for and cut a card about something. So you want to take a screenshot of this or write down or copy and paste that link or write it really quickly before I switch over. All right, I'm now going to go ahead and switch. All right, so what I have for you now is number one, I'm going to show you those resources I talked about. So this is Site Creator if you want to get that extension for Google Chrome. And it looks like this. It's going to open up a little window that allows you to see kind of author name or add and modify author name, qualification, date, title, and publication. Additionally, the other tool I have here is verbatim. So if you search for verbatim debate and then click on this first link here, it's going to pull up that tool and you will have to download verbatim and install it on your device in order for that to be something for you to use. Again, this is for Mac and PC. who have full copies of Microsoft Word installed. Okay, and so you obviously pick whatever version corresponds to your device and go from there. So I want to actually show you some searches in Google Scholar, for example. So if I'm searching for this topic, so I want things like secondary sanctions, and I'm going to put that in quotations, and I'm going to type and I want another quotation, and let's say Russia. So this should bring up articles that mention both secondary sanctions and Russia, and I can even add one more and say United States. So if I then click search, it's going to bring up lots of articles for me. I can see this is a book, so I don't want to click on that just yet, but I see a lot of old things. So I want something newer, more modern. So I want to say since 2016, for example, because I know 2016 is a significant year when it comes to sanctioning of Russia, because that was the 2016 presidential election. And so now I have some more updated materials that are much newer. So I'm gonna click on this first link here, see where that takes me. Come on. Oh, that is not in English. So I don't want that source. This is not in English. So I can't do much with that right now. So let's maybe look at this link. So this is a PDF, looks like, that I do have some access to. So this is possibly good. Now, as you can see here, Site Creator is not working perfectly on this website. It is not able to find some of the info, and it also doesn't have a very good rating for this website. But I'm gonna quickly cut a card for you. So for this purpose, I'm gonna just head to CNN just so I can grab something quick and easy. And I know Site Creator works on that website. So let's see. I'm gonna click on this first.
One of the interesting things too that that was brought up in lab was that it's whenever you cut a card, people want to be able to see the context of it. So you're never going to cut more than or less than 3 paragraphs. It'll be the paragraph that has the bit in it you think you want, and then the one before it and the one after it, so that your readers and consumers can always know the context of the evidence.
Absolutely, and I have an example of that a little bit later in the presentation, so you can see what that looks like if you're more of a visual learner. So I have an article here on CNN that I think I want to cut a card from. So when I'm doing that with my nifty tool of Site Creator, I can know that if I click Control-Alt-C, it'll copy whatever my mouse has highlighted in addition to the full citation. So I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to grab a good chunk of this article to send it over to a Word document. So I'm gonna say, I'm highlighting it and I'm gonna hit Control-Alt-C. And so it's now copied everything that's highlighted and the site to my clipboard. And then if I paste it, it's gonna have everything there. This top bar here, what you're looking at is verbatim. So what I wanna do with this text is first, I know that I don't wanna read all of this in the debate round. So I'm gonna highlight all of it. But I also want to fix some of the formatting of this. So I'm going to hit the F3, the condense function, and it gets rid of all of the spacing and weird formatting. So the next thing I want to do is then I want to decide what part of the card I actually want to possibly read. So I'm going to underline that. So for example, President Donald Trump said Wednesday that he would have no problem wearing a face mask in public. And if you ever want to do non-consecutive highlighting with your mouse, you just hit Control on your computer. It'll keep whatever you previously had highlighted done, but I can then lift up my mouse and begin highlighting something else. So I can then say, this is a pivot from his months-long refusal to wear a mask in public, and say, when asked whether he would wear a mask, Trump told Fox Business, oh, I would have. I mean, people have seen me wearing one. If I'm in a group of people, we're not 10 feet away. So let's say that I want to possibly read that in my debate round. I'm going to go up and click the F9 function, and that's going to highlight that for me. And then out of that, I may want to read even less. So I'm then going to go back and highlight. So I might say something like President Trump said he would have no problem wearing a face mask. Oh, I messed it up. So then I'm going to go up and I'm going to hit the highlight function. And let's say I've decided that's all I want to read from this card, and the rest of this seems to be taking up space for me. I'm going to highlight everything here. That is the text of the card. And I'm then going to hit this function here called shrink. All right, 1 second. I'm going to hit the shrink function, and everything that's not underlined or highlighted is then shrunken to size 8 text. So it's now not in the way, and you can more easily read all the material that you want to use. So next, I need to deal with this citation. So the first thing I'm going to do is add in my signature. So I'm going to do space, space, and then backslash, backslash. And you have to do this so you don't break the link to the article. And I am a teacher at Greenhill School, so it's GHS, and then it's going to be DP. So we know that Greenhill School, Demarcus Powell, cut the card. So next, you have to deal with this citation and formatting it. So if you hit just citation link up here, sometimes it makes it really big. Really, that is the key for a tag. That's how I want my tag to look. So I don't want my citation to look like that. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to hit F12, and that's going to clear all the formatting. So I know really I just want these last names and the year bolded, and then the rest of it can be small. So it's going to be Vasquez and Malloy, 20. And that's all I really want for my site. And the rest of this can then be shrunken. And then the last thing you want to do is press enter and write your tagline here. And whenever you're writing tags, the general rule about kind of basic arguments is you want your tags to be about 10 words long. Now, obviously for this example, I did not follow all the ethical practices of cutting a card that you would want to follow. I just did it very quickly. So for anybody who has never used verbatim, you can see it in action. But obviously, if I were cutting this card for a debate round, I would cut much more of the article and take a lot more time carefully reading it to make sure that I am being ethical when I'm cutting that card. So that is an example of verbatim for a debate. Really quickly, now I also want to show another function of verbatim for when you are in debate rounds, and that is making a speech document.
Okay. So Demarcus, I loved the functionality you just demonstrated, and I have never used that much functionality within verbatim. That was amazing. I just want to make sure that we can capture what you just showed us in a couple of, you were good at identifying the steps. I just want to throw the steps in the chat.
Okay.
So the first step was to click the site creator and highlight the section.
Yep. And then you're going to hit Control-Alt-C, and it's going to grab everything highlighted with the citation.
Okay. And then
you're going to go to a Word document and just hit paste or Control-V.
Okay.
And then from there, you want to read through the card and underline the relevant parts.
And you had a pretty cool,
Yep.
yeah.
You can do non-consecutive highlighting, so where you can skip spaces, so like how I skipped here between Donald and said Wednesday, and you can then lift up your right finger from your left mouse clicker and highlight something else. So that's holding down Control while you're highlighting, and then you want to hit the underline function, and then once you actually decide what you want to read from the underline section, you want to highlight that. And so after you do that bit of highlighting, you then want to go up and fix your citation and make sure you, if you want to, or your school does it, have a signature and do the bolding for the last name and the year. And then you, after you do all of that, you're going to write a tagline. And for simple arguments, it's about 10 words long. I see we have a question for someone in the chat from, is it Hannah? Hannah, if you have a question, you can unmute yourself and turn on your video, and I would be happy to answer that question.
I was just wondering, for like the holding down the highlighting and moving around, do you know if it's control or command on a Mac?
So on a Mac, it's command. On PC, it's control. Great
Okay,
question.
thank you.
Is it control alt or just control?
Just control for the non-consecutive highlighting.
Okay.
All right, William, what was your question?
So it says it's recording this call. So will this lecture be available later?
Yes, it will be.
Where?
I'm not sure exactly where yet, but I will get that information to you and since you're in my lab in the next lab session. All right.
I think they put them in, like there's an online catalog of electives, and so I think they end up caching them there. Within the LD classroom, I think it might, like if you go into the shared drive, you end up finding them in there. But yeah, Demarcus will nail it down precisely.
I'll make sure you can get all of this. And so I'm going to show you a little bit more functionality now. So once you get a little bit more advanced, you're going to need to create a speech document with multiple positions in it possibly. So first you have to open up what you want. So these are old files from Greenhill from last year. So I want to open up one counter plan. I'm going to open up one disad. If you don't know what these things are, that's perfectly fine. You'll learn those, I'm sure, much later from your lab leaders. Let's see. What I want. So once I have these documents open, I'm going to walk you through the process of creating a speech document in a debate round. So I have a disad open. I have a counter plan. Oh, my counter plan didn't open. Let's go back and open that. And then once that's open, I'm going to use verbatim to create a new speech document. So I'm going to go over here, have all these tools. I'm going to hit the speech drop down button. Really cool trick. If you're logged into your Tabroom account from verbatim and you are in a tournament, it'll generate names of your files that are contextual to the debate round you're in, including who you're debating and what time and day it is. So for this, I'm going to select a 1NC, because that's the speech I'm making. I'm going to just save it to my documents and see its speech, 1NC, 7/1, 4 p.m. I'm going to hit save. The next thing I want to do is hit choose document. And this is going to tell verbatim where to send the things that I want it to process to be in my speech document. So I'm going to select this current document and hit choose doc. And then I'm going to make a 1 and a 2 and highlight those. And then I'm going to use a little bit of verbatim functioning. I'm going to create hats for that. And I'm going to put my cursor right here. So if I go to then my file I have open, my counter plan, I can put my cursor right here where it says 1NC. And I can either hit this little blue arrow up here or the key just below escape on your keyboards. Either one of those functions, if I hit it, oh, that's weird. Little verbatim hiccup. Let's go back and choose doc again. Oh, that's weird.
I think it's because you only chose the DA to choose.
No, this is the right document. It just didn't recognize it for whatever reason. So let's try that again. Okay. Sure. Create one. Oh. Okay. Looks like verbatim's having a little tech problem, but in the perfect world, when you hit that key, everything from that header to the next header, so this 1NC header to this next header that says this, everything between those places, so all of this would be automatically copied to our document with all of the formatting. So you wouldn't have to do what I just did and hold down anything. It would automatically send everything over. So we're going to try it again with the counter plan file we have open. And let's see if that works. Or let's say, that's the counter plan with the disad file. So I want 1NC. Let's hit the key. And when we go back to our document, as you can see, everything is there. All right.
What's the key?
So it's the key just below the escape key. It has a little squiggly line on it. Or you can hit this blue arrow at the top left. It'll also, it's called the send to document function. It'll send it to whatever document you have chosen and selected. One tip is that that document you selected has to have the word speech in the title, or otherwise you'll get that error you just saw that I got, where verbatim says there's not a speech document open. So this, as you can see, is now a 1NC with a counterplant and a disadd in it. And in the ideal world, you could add in 4 or 5 off-case positions with only 5 or 6 mouse clicks. So, and as you can see, this document is already named and saved. And a couple other cool functions with verbatim that you can use is it can automatically, if there's any USB drive plugged in, I can hit this button and this document is copied to that drive automatically. Additionally, you can also do things like record how fast it is you're speaking. Verbatim can tell you how many words per minute you speak to help you better estimate how much you can get through in any document that you create. And there's lots of other cool tricks that you can explore. When you download verbatim, it's gonna come to the a window where you can run through the verbatim tutorial. So that can be found here. If I click tutorial, it would then run me through all the different functions of verbatim. All right, so that is all for my demonstration for verbatim. I'm now gonna return back to the PowerPoint and we gotta talk about a couple more things before we wrap up today. All right, so the next thing we need to talk about, we just did this example. A couple, if you wanna see this kind of in writing, this is here. I won't read all of this to you because I just demonstrated it. But again, you're gonna have access to this document and this PowerPoint, so you can always come back to this slide when you are confused about making a speech doc. Additionally, you can also run the tutorial in verbatim. It'll walk you through step by step how to do what I just did in the exact way. So the next thing is ethical card cutting, which we've kind of referenced a few times. I'm gonna let Ms. Morehouse handle the bulk of this section. Just let me know when you'd like to go to the next slide.
Okay, so with ethical card cutting, you guys, within a debate round, I mean, there's several reasons why ethics are super important, because debate isn't just about winning. It's not just about trophies. At the end of the day, it's about representing yourself, your family, your school, your community, and like being aware that your actions that you take within the community build the community. So you want to be part of something good, you need to make the good, hard choices. So to guide us down that road, we have a few points. These are as important as not following any of these could be grounds for an ethics challenge. If you are found to be misrepresenting evidence, this could result in an automatic loss. And, you know, down the road, it could result in a lot more than just a loss, which would be, you know, shaming yourself, your family, your school. When you are cutting a card, you should be aware of the author's position. Read the entire article or section of the article if it's a book or journal entry, and not cut philosophy cards out of context. So understanding the author's position, I don't know how many of you guys did, we've done big question debates over the last few years, and I know the finals round for the big question debate, it was the year when we were talking about animals and people, and both sides were reading evidence from Adler. Adler concludes a certain way, but you're in the final round of a national championship and you're reading evidence where, you know, if you've like, you know, I think the evidence packet that was presented initially had cards from him both in the affirmative and in the negative. So you know there's evidence going both ways. That his final position does side a certain way. And, you know, and I think it was I'm not even going to get into the weeds on that. I kind of already have. But it just shows you the importance that even in the finals round of a national tournament, that final point really came down to deciding the win or the loss on nationalized television. So you really do have to read the entire article or book to know how the author's going to decide. We specify philosophy cards, and that's just because philosophers, they like to think out loud. They're gonna be there and be thinking out loud. So you can't necessarily take one paragraph and say that's what this philosopher says, because philosophy can be rather obtuse. You want to make sure that whenever you cut a card that you include the whole section. Even if it looks like a lot, you can use the shrink function in verbatim or with that debate template. And any text there is, just for context, will be reduced to a size 8. You never want to cut out the middle of an article without including the previous and following paragraphs. This applies to books and articles. So the reason that you're hearing this in your labs, and we're referencing that multiple times in this presentation, isn't because it's that difficult of a concept. It's because it's that important. Okay, so, and yeah, we'll go to the next slide.
One thing I'll add about philosophy is that a lot of philosophers will summarize their opponent's arguments before they dissect them. And sometimes I found that debaters have cut the summary from one person of another person's argument. This is called a straw man. And so you never want to cut, this is why we say don't cut those out of context, because that is exactly what it means. They're already attacking their opponent's viewpoint. And so their summary of what that author says is not always the best.
Absolutely. Okay, so to continue on, about the use of brackets in evidence, never, ever, ever change the words of an author. Never. Never change an author's words. This should only be done in instances where it is justified. For example, gendered, ableist, exclusionary language. You can also bracket and highlight acronyms for organizations or states. If you are changing it for, say, because of ableist language, if you're in Colorado, you should, you should be sure to indicate that you're doing that. Mm-hmm. Other than that, the text of the evidence should never be modified. You should not change words for efficiency. You should never bracket or insert words that change the meaning of the text. Do not change words. The best evidence will come from peer-reviewed journals, then books, governmental websites such as the Congressional Research Service.
Do you want to talk a bit about what kind of sources are the most reliable, Ms. Morehouse?
Absolutely. So I think sometimes you can jump straight into the most reliable sources, but sometimes when you're first learning about a topic, you're going to have like a broader basis for trying to come to terms with what the topic's covering. As you get deeper into the topic, that's when you start to get better and better research. So, starting off at the beginning, you may do a few videos just to increase your understanding, and then you may go to articles and books. We have websites in here as well. You guys know that not all websites are created equally. You can tell the source of a website based on the last 3 letters. So if it's .com, it's generally less reliable than .edu or .gov. People's blogs and opinions, I wouldn't bother citing them at all, personally. But going into that, you have articles from popular, from like newspapers and magazines that help us to understand the topic. They're going to be referencing someone who's actually done more scientific research. And so you can see who they're referencing and then go read that person's work. That's going to be a peer-reviewed article. generally is going to be the very, very, like the best. And then I would say a peer-reviewed meta-analysis of the literature is, even better than that. And that's just because that meta-analysis encompasses a lot of different points of research. And if it's peer-reviewed, then you have some people doing the reviewing who are not going to have, you can have one person doing research, and if they're backed by money, say the Beef Council, then maybe the research on how eating cows impacts heart disease, maybe their research isn't going to be as credible. But if it's peer reviewed, you're going to have 7 other professionals sitting there going, yes, this person did a great job. This is an awesome, awesome chart that it depicts the leanings of different news sources. As you guys know, there's different news sources are going to represent different viewpoints. So this is a media bias chart, and you want to go towards the neutral news sources for your leanings. If you're writing a case, and exactly right there with Demarcus just circled. And if you're writing everything from like the far right or the far left, your arguments are not going to be as credible or as valid, as if you stuck to that middle neutral part. Demarcus, do you want to share what are some of the best sources?
Oh. Yeah, absolutely. So like you talked about, and I want to stress, the peer-reviewed journals and books are going to be some of the best sources, but among news sources, you want to stay as neutral as possible. And in particular, you want to get articles or cards from both a domestic source and an international source. They're both going to have different viewpoints and different descriptions of what's happening in the world or in the country you're talking about. So one of my favorites for that is Reuters, the service right here at the very top. Whenever I want to read about even the news that's happening here, I'll flip through a few of these, and I'll usually go for a couple here in this neutral section that are based on original fact reporting, and then I'll do a couple from other sources outside of this bubble. But I also love NPR, which is a great resource to use. They write lots of articles about the US. They also have a podcast, so they do lots of different things, and you can use audio sources from news organizations. The only thing you have to do is essentially write out word for word what the interview says into a document so that you can cut the card from that. It is a long, tedious process, but if the only material you can find comes from an interview from a credible source that's published in a news organization, you can make a transcript of that interview and then cut the card from there. Additionally, it'll always give you a good viewpoint on what's happening in the world by looking at a few sources. So I always look at CNN. It's a kind of liberal leaning source from the US that does a lot of fact reporting, but sometimes just opinion. So people think CNN is the best. It's not. It has its own biases and leanings as well. I'll go to CNN, I'll go to Reuters, and I'll go to like a Fox News and then a BuzzFeed News. And so I get a little bit of everything to see what everyone is saying before I even personally form an opinion about something. And you should try to do the same thing, both in your personal and professional kind of and academic careers, to always have a good view of all the different viewpoints. That's one of the best skills debate can teach us.
Absolutely. And I think that I had a debater last year who was able to find that there may be something online that transcribes interviews into text. And then I know just talking about staying up with world events, there's, I could say easy slacker ways, or I could say ways to be efficient with our consumption of the news. But we have like one of those little Google shows or Alexa, and I'll ask Alexa for my briefing, and all of that is from Reuters. And then you can also subscribe to Demarcus. You could probably speak to this better, but there's different news apps that you can subscribe based on keywords, so that you're sent notifications on particular topics that you're following in the news. And if you're tracking something in the debate world, that's changing hour by hour or day by day, you want to make sure that you're up on that. And two, it just makes research kind of fun and easy.
Yep. The thing you're talking about, the one I've used before is Google News Alerts. So it'll allow you to set keywords that'll send you emails whenever those keywords pop up in an article, and it'll send you every single article from every source that has those keywords in them. So that's also a really great tool for keeping your research that you do up to date. As we know, debate topics, you get it, let's say in August, and you're gonna debate it all the way until Halloween, right? October 31st. So that's a large amount of time, and something that is happening in the real world changes. And so you want to make sure you keep the most up-to-date evidence when it needs to be updated because something about the real world has changed. I just want to go to one more slide before we wrap up here. And this is a visual representation of what we talk about when we talk about ethical card cutting. So if I was cutting this article and I grabbed everything that was highlighted and I did not grab this section here, that would not be an ethical way to cut cards, right? I need to include this part, even if I know there's nothing I want to read from that part of the article, all right? And so you need to grab all of these paragraphs, and then like I told you and showed you, you can just highlight or underline these and then shrink this, but it needs to be in context. All right.
Awesome. Yeah.
So we're just about out of time, and that's about all I have for you. I'm gonna leave this screen up in case you wanna grab some of the resources I've shown you. If you gain access to the PowerPoint, some of the slides are gonna have notes in the notes section with links to some of the things I referenced, as well as information and explanation. I would highly recommend that you go ahead and download this stuff now. And if you have any questions, I'll stick around and answer those. So if you just want to raise your hand in the chat function so I can see people, because I can't see everyone at once, I'll be happy to answer your questions.
I have a question.
Let's see, who is that talking?
Oh, David Chen.
All right, go for your question.
Okay, so for the site creator, like how do you apply it on the site? Because for you, there's just like an automatic like little box on the left side.
Yeah.
I mean the right side.
So if you click on the top right of Google Chrome where you see the little two quotations, that's the symbol for it. It has an on-off function. You turn it on, and then you have to reload whatever you're looking at least one time. And then every website you go to when it's on will have that box in the bottom right, even if there's no info to display. And you can edit the info it displays if it doesn't grab it automatically through a series of functions, and it tells you when you click on the little icon what functions those are.
Oh wait, let me see. Oh yeah, I saw. Okay, thank you. And then for the Google Doc thing, the debate template, does it have any extra functions? Because
So
I downloaded
I've used that before. I'll let Ms. Morehouse take that question.
You know, Demarcus, I was blown away with some of that functionality in Verbatim. And it is not a level that I have personally explored in that debate template. I've only ever used debate template to work on forming cards. So we will have office hours, and that's something we can look at. You know, sign up for office hours and we can look at it then together, or you can kind of play around with it. That functionality within Verbatim of being able to pull in documents and being able to link with tab room, that's amazing. So that's just mind-blowingly awesome. And I haven't seen that in debate template. But
thank you.
I also haven't looked. So
Any other questions? I see, William, is that your hand still up, or is that from the previous question?
Hand still up. So this isn't a question about the content, but the slideshow, could I have access to that so I can look at it later?
So if you go to the speech drop, one of the documents listed there is a Word document, and that Word document will give you a link to this on Google Slides.
Oh, okay, great.
I'm gonna post what I have a screenshot of what I see as the functionality within debate template.
All right.
And so I'll drop that in the chat.
Does anyone else have any final questions? We are past the time limit here, so I'll let you go. This lecture is now concluded. You can log out, take a break before you go to your, I believe, office hours is next for some people. I think Mountain and West Coast.
Bye, guys. Thanks for being here. Great job, Demarcus.
Thank
A
you.
lot of good information.
I think
Thank
you.